He locked a stranger in his office at midnight, but discovered a millionaire doctor. The midnight clock ticked ominously in the deserted office. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering like ghosts in a haunted house. Jake's heart raced as he locked the door behind him. Who was that figure lurking in the corner? He could barely see through the dim light, but the man was there, hunched, breathing heavily. Fear gripped Jake's chest like a vice. He had never felt so alive and terrified at the same time. With a reluctant gulp, Jake edged closer, the smell of old wood mixed with something sharp and metallic filling his nostrils. As he squinted, he noticed the man's tailored suit crisp, upscale. How had he ended up here, hands stained with secrets? The office's decor whispered wealth, plush carpets, mahogany desks, and a state-of-the-art computer. But the stranger's presence felt like a dark storm brewing under this facade of luxury. Suddenly, the stranger looked up. Panic flared in his eyes, and for a moment, Jake swore he saw desperation mingled with authority. "You don't understand." The man gasped, his voice trembling. "They're coming for me." A shiver in the air crackled like static electricity, thick and heavy with dread. Jake's mind raced with questions. Who is this guy? Why was he hiding out? The tension in the room felt suffocating, a tangible pulse throbbing in the air. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jake was jolted back, realizing this man was not just a stranger, but perhaps someone who held the key to a world he didn't know existed. The stranger leaned closer, eyes wide, whispering conspiracies that grew darker with every word. His breathing quickened, each mention of danger pushing Jake's anxiety further. A million thoughts crashed together. Who was threatening him? And why had he locked him in here? As the midnight hour crept on, Jake wondered if the secrets uncovered tonight would pull him into something far beyond his imagination. What lay ahead, tangled in mystery, as the walls of the city outside swallowed their restless whispers. The darkness outside echoed loudly, begging for answers, and Jake felt his heart tuned to the rhythm of something wild and unpredictable. Little did he know, unlocking the door would plunge him into a storm he could never have anticipated. "Listen to me." The stranger's voice cracked, pulling Jake out of his thoughts. "My name is Dr. Victor Hale. They are on my tail, and if they find me here..." The urgency in Victor's eyes ignited a fire inside Jake. He felt a wave of instincts rise, pushing him to protect this man despite the lingering fear. "Who is they?" Jake demanded, ignoring the pit in his stomach. Victor shook his head, his gaunt face taut with tension. "I can't say, not yet. But there are powerful people who want something from me. And if they discover what I know, it could spell disaster." Jake gulped, struggling to process Victor's frantic words. The sweltering air thickened, prickling his skin. This wasn't just some strange encounter. This was a crossroads with stakes higher than he ever imagined. Out of nowhere, the lights flickered overhead. The ominous hum of the office filled the silence, momentarily masking the pounding of Jake's heart. Then a loud thud echoed from the direction of the door, making both men jump. "Did you hear that?" Jake whispered, glancing toward the shadows pooling near the door. Victor nodded, his face paler than before. "It's them. They've found me," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. Panic surged. Jake's instincts kicked in. He had to act, but how? He couldn't just open the door and invite whatever awaited them inside. What if they were armed? He tapped into every shred of courage he could muster. "Okay, we need a plan," Jake said as his eyes darted around the room, seeking an escape route. The windows were sealed tight, and the only way out was through the door. He felt trapped, like a rat in a cage. Breaths deepened, and the air grew sharply cold with fear. "Listen," Victor continued, urgency cracking through his voice. "I have something that they want to file on my computer. It holds secrets about a corrupt network of physicians and investors. If they get it before another loud banging on the door interrupted them, making Victor jump. The sound echoed like thunder, shaking the walls around them. Jake felt a rush of adrenaline spike through his veins. They were coming. Can you access it? Jake asked, trying to keep his voice steady. I can try. Victor shot back, rapidly moving toward the desk. He yanked the drawer open, revealing a sleek laptop. His fingers flew over the keys, racing against time. Each tick of the clock sounded like a countdown to disaster. Come on, Victor muttered under his breath, sweat beading on his forehead. Jake's anxiety turned into focus. Every noise outside was a reminder that danger lurked just beyond the door. He could see shadows moving in the glass, dark shapes ominous and threatening. They were circling like vultures. Just then, the door rattled violently and the handle twisted. Jake's heart froze. They're breaking in. Victor's eyes widened, panic taking hold. I'm almost in, he exclaimed, fingers flying over the keyboard with desperate speed. Before Jake could even grasp the gravity of their situation, the door splintered with a violent crack, sending splinters across the room. Every ounce of Jake's resolve ignited. Get ready to run. With one last desperate stroke, Victor's face transformed. Got it, he yelled. The screen lit with ominous data, a web of betrayal and secrets laid bare. Now what? Jake exclaimed, the door groaning loudly as it was pounded again. Now we get out, but I need the file with me, Victor shouted, looking desperate. The door was about to break. Panic surged again, crashing into Jake's mind. Just as he turned toward the window, a voice boomed from the hallway, sending a chill down his spine. Dr. Hale, we know you're in there. You have nowhere to hide. The room felt electric with impending doom as Jake's thoughts spiraled. They had seconds, maybe less. What do we do now? But even as he asked, the suffocating darkness that wrapped around the room held an answer. It was about to become a fight for their lives. Jake's mind raced as he glanced back at the screen. A grid of names and figures displayed on Victor's laptop, blinking furiously in defiance of their impending doom. Can't we just save it on a USB or something? He shouted over the echoing crashes against the door. Panic had turned the words into a frantic plea for survival. I'm trying, Victor replied, his shaking hands making it nearly impossible to navigate. The door splintered again, splintering an ominous crack that near paralyzed Jake with fear. His heart pounded in his chest, a drum of terror. He could see the fear in Victor's wide eyes. This wasn't just about them anymore. It felt bigger, darker. Whatever was happening out there was monstrous, an entity with teeth that would not stop until it took what it wanted. Just hurry, Jake urged, glancing back at the door. Got it. With one final keystroke, Victor's fingers flew off the keyboard, and he shoved an external hard drive into Jake's hands. This has everything. Now let us go. Without another word, Jake launched himself toward the door as Victor snatched up the laptop. The door was clearly buckling under force, threatening to shatter completely. They needed to move, and fast. Together, Jake and Victor barreled into the hallway just as the door gave way, splintering into fragments like a toothless grin. The hallway was dim, lit only by eerie green emergency lights flickering. Jake's heart raced, fueled by adrenaline, and he turned to find Victor standing still, his face twisted in panic. Which way? Victor gasped, clearly struggling to catch his breath as if the fear had sucked all the air from the space. Down the hall. We can find a way out, Jake shouted, urgency punctuating every word. He didn't wait for a response, bolting forward with Victor on his heels. The shadows that danced along the walls felt alive, threatening to swallow them whole. Every footfall echoed, a reminder that danger was right behind them. Suddenly, a voice bellowed from the entrance of the building, cold and commanding, "You cannot escape, Dr. Hale. We have orders to take you back." Victor staggered, fear written all over him. "They're here," he hissed, eyes darting. Jake grabbed Victor's arm, pulling him forward. "Stop looking back. Just run." A burst of energy fueled by terror pushed them further into the maze of the building. They turned corners, slipping past bathrooms and break rooms, the stench of stale coffee amplifying the anxiety around them. "Here." Victor pointed to a stairwell at the end of the corridor. Without a moment's hesitation, they dove down the stairs, the concrete echoing with each step like cannon fire. The shadows twisted ominously behind them, a reminder that they weren't safe. As they reached the bottom, a heavy door stood ajar, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old equipment and dusty files. Jake didn't want to stop, but they needed a moment to regroup. Inside, quickly, Victor urged, shoving the door open. They squeezed into the cramped space, both panting heavily. Now what? Jake whispered, his heart still racing with adrenaline. Victor's fingers trembled as he clicked to open the hard drive on the laptop. If I can just see what I've stored, the files could lead us to a way out. But as Victor breathed heavily, there came a slow, deliberate sound outside, a deliberate scraping, as if something were being dragged through the hallway. Jake's skin prickled with fear. They know where we are, Jake whispered, eyes wide with realization. We need to get out of here. Victor looked even more frantic. I need just 1 minute, he insisted, staring intently at the screen, but Jake could feel the urgency clawing at his chest. The scraping grew louder, accompanied now by hushed voices whispering just outside their hiding spot. Dr. Hale, we will find you. The voice was colder than steel, each word layered with malice. Jake's instincts screamed at him to act. They needed to move, to escape. But how? He grabbed Victor's shoulder, shaking him. Now or never, Victor. If you can't get that file, we have to run. But just as he spoke, the door to the storeroom rattled violently, and their eyes locked in pure dread. Outside, shadows gathered, their silhouettes looming like dark specters ready to pounce. Jake, I don't think we have much time, Victor whispered, his voice trembling on the brink of panic. With one powerful shove, the door burst open, and the menacing figures stepped through, their expressions masked in darkness. In that moment, as Jake's heart sank into his stomach, one thought crystallized. It was about to become a fight to the end. What had they stumbled into, and who were these monsters that were hunting them? The darkness enveloped them like a thick fog, suffocating and full of foreboding. Every breath felt heavy as the figures loomed closer, their features concealed, but the wickedness in their stance was painfully clear. Jake swallowed hard, uncertainty coursing through him like ice in his veins. Victor, Jake barely managed to utter, his voice cracking. He willed himself to remain calm, to think. But Victor had frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief as he glanced back at the screen, the laptop humming with the last vestiges of hope. We can't leave, I can find a way, he insisted, voice high-pitched and shaky. Forget the files. We need to move, Jake yelled, spinning Victor around, ready to pull him out of their hiding spot. But the shadows advanced, and there was no way to know how many lurked just outside. A chilling laugh echoed from the figure who seemed to lead the charge, a low, mocking sound that sent shivers racing down Jake's spine. Dr. Hale, the voice dripped with malice. You should have known better than to steal from us. Steal? Confusion twisted through Jake's mind. What could Victor have taken that warranted this level of violence? They had opened Pandora's box, and now, like moths to a flame, they hung dangerously close to a cataclysm. In a burst of instinctual courage, Jake lunged for the nearest figure, adrenaline giving him strength. He struck out, feeling nothing but the cool air where the shadow had been just a moment ago. It vanished as if it had never been there, and Jake stumbled forward, disoriented. Get down, Victor shouted, a sudden urgency in his tone. He had found something, a metal rod from an old shelving unit that had fallen to the ground. The clang of metal echoed, urging Jake back to reality. With a fierce determination, Victor swung the rod at the nearest shadow, catching one off guard. There was a sickening thud, followed by a gasp. We have to go now, Victor yelled, pushing past Jake toward the exit. Jake forced himself to follow, each footstep tinged with dread as they rushed out of the room, the walls pulsating with shadows chasing them. The stairwell yawned before them, a dark abyss of unknown terror. This way, Jake said, pointing to a side door that led to another staircase. They dashed into the stairwell, their breaths a cacophony of panic. The sound of boots thundered behind them, a relentless pursuit clawing at their heels. "Faster, Victor," Jake urged, the fear driving them down several flights without pause. They broke free at another floor, and Jake spotted a window. "We can escape through here. Help me." Victor nodded frantically, and together they shoved at the window. With a loud screech, it swung open, exposing the raw night air. Distant lights twinkled like stars on a backdrop of fear, providing a glimmer of hope. Just then, a roar echoed from the staircase. "They've gone up. Stop them." The sound shattered their momentary relief, urgency slicing through the air. "Let us jump," Jake shouted, his voice barely registered over the chaos. But Victor hesitated, fear overtaking him. "What if we fall?" "Jake, we don't know how far it is." Jake's heart raced against the backdrop of shouts growing louder. "We have no choice. We die here if we don't move." He grabbed Victor's arm, ready to leap into the unknown. The pounding of footsteps grew closer. The shadows lurked, wrapping tighter around them like a sinister cloak. With a final cry of determination, they dove out into the open, hurtling toward the ground. As gravity took hold, and the world spun, Jake could only think one thing: had they leaped into the abyss or toward salvation? But before they hit the ground, a blinding light exploded around them, and Jake felt a jolt that knocked the breath from his body. As their fate hung in the balance, a singular thought pierced through the chaos. What awaited them on the other side? Jake's senses flared to life as the blinding light engulfed him. The world twisted, his body weightless for what felt like an eternity. The sound of wind roared, a furious rush that drowned out his thoughts. Then, with a violent crash, the light vanished, and he slammed onto the cold, hard ground. Dazed, Jake blinked against the disorientation. He lay sprawled in an empty alley, concrete beneath him. He pushed himself to sit, heart racing, scanning the shadows around him, eyes darting for any sign of their pursuers. "Victor?" he gasped, struggling to his feet. The alley was dark, the stench of trash and dampness hanging thick in the air. "Over here." Victor's voice, shaky but clear, echoed from the far side of the alley. Relief surged through Jake as he hurried over, finding Victor crouched behind a dumpster, clutching the metal rod tightly. "What just happened?" Victor breathed, his eyes wide, a sheen of sweat glistening on his forehead. "I don't know, but we need to keep moving," Jake insisted, glancing back nervously. The thought of the shadows closing in still haunted him. "Those people, who are they?" "Whoever they are, they're not just ordinary thugs." Victor paused, hesitating. "I didn't just steal files, Jake. I hacked into their network. They've been doing things. Terrible things." "What kind of things?" Jake asked, a knot of dread forming in his gut. Victor swallowed hard. "They've been experimenting with bioengineering, illegal trials. They're dangerous, Jake. We have to find a way to expose them before they come for us." A sudden clatter shattered the tension in the alley, and both boys spun around. Shadows spilled from the end of the alley, dark shapes moving deliberately toward them. "Run!" Jake shouted, instinct overriding panic. They bolted, hearts pounding, adrenaline propelling them forward. The alley twisted and turned, echoes of their footsteps mixing with the sinister sounds of pursuit. Jake's breath came in ragged gasps as he glanced over his shoulder, but the shadows were relentless, disembodied voices calling out ominously. "There! The street!" Victor barely shouted above the chaos, pointing to a faint shaft of light at the alley's end. They burst onto the street, the night open and vulnerable. Desperation fueled their sprint as headlights from oncoming cars blurred past. Jake ducked and weaved, scanning for a way to lose their pursuers. "Where do we go?" Victor shouted breathlessly. "Anywhere but here," Jake gasped. He spotted a nearby diner, lights flickering cheerfully against the darkness. It was a risk, but they dove into the diner's open door, the bell chiming eerily as they skidded across the floor. Inside, the small group of patrons turned, eyes wide with surprise. Jake and Victor raced to the back, their hearts pounding like drums in their chests. "Help us!" Jake yelled at the waitress, who seemed frozen in shock. "We're being followed." Before she could respond, the front door of the diner burst open. The shadows spilled in like a tide, dark and sweeping. Jake's heart sank as familiar voices rang out, menacing and clear. "They're in here. Secure the exit. Victor, get ready to fight." Jake hissed, adrenaline sharpening his focus. He grabbed a chair as the figures advanced, but just as they braced for confrontation, a booming voice interrupted, cutting through the fear. "Who dares trespass?" The air felt heavy with tension as a tall shadow stepped forward, a commanding presence. "I demand answers." Jake could hardly breathe, confusion mingling with a flicker of hope. But who was this new figure, and could he be friend or foe? The clamor from the shadows grew louder as they closed in, and all Jake could think was, would they live to uncover the truth hidden in the darkness? As the lights flickered ominously overhead, the confrontation loomed closer. What revelation awaited them now? The tall figure stepped closer, revealing a striking visage burned into Jake's memory. Beneath the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner, he recognized the man, Dr. Ethan Wright, the infamous bioengineer linked to the very experiments Victor had uncovered. The fear in Jake twisted sharply into a different kind of dread. "Stand down," Dr. Wright commanded, his voice resonating with authority. The shadows hesitated, murmurs of confusion rippling through the ranks as they searched the room for some understanding of the scenario before them. "Are you with them?" Jake barked, his heart hammering in his chest, adrenaline coursing through him. He could barely digest the sight of the man, not because of his past achievements, but because of the whispers linking him to a series of missing persons in the city. "Enough." Dr. Wright's voice sliced through Jake's thoughts. "Whoever you think I am, there's no time for this. You're in danger, and those men," he pointed to the shadows now creeping cautiously toward the back, "they don't care about you. You hold something they want." "What could we possibly hold?" Victor chimed in, voice trembling but laced with defiance. Dr. Wright stepped further into the light and lowered his voice, urgency threading through each word. "You have the files Victor stole. Do you understand the repercussions? You hold the key to an operation that could bring down an empire. Hand it over and I can help you." "Help us?" Jake scoffed, skepticism dripping from every syllable. "How do we know you're not just another one of them?" The atmosphere thickened, the looming threat of the shadow men sharpening the tension. They seemed to come alive, inching toward the trio, the glint of menace in their eyes. Dr. Wright clenched his jaw, exasperation flashing across his face. "Because I risked everything to be here. I need to destroy the evidence for everyone's safety. You don't know what they're capable of. Please trust me." But Jake wasn't ready to yield. "You might be the monster in this story, Dr. Wright. I want to let you twist this. We don't have time," Victor urged, fear crusting in his voice as he peeked over his shoulder. The shadows were closer now, their dark forms melding seamlessly into the diner's warped corners. Dr. Wright turned, his face taut with urgency. "If you want to trust me, then keep your backs to me. When I give the signal," he paused, drawing in a breath, "you run. You don't stop until you're far away from here. Understood?" An unworldly tension coursed through the diner, and the air was thick with impending violence. As Jake locked eyes with Victor, it became clear they had little choice. Shadows crushed against the sanctity of the diner, leaving no room for an alternate path. "That way, Jake," Victor shouted, pointing to the kitchen exit, barely visible behind a chaos of brewing pots and frenzied cooks. "On three," Dr. Wright barked, raising his arm. 1, 2, 3. In a sudden surge, the trio lunged for the kitchen, the shadows closing in from behind, voices taunting them. The air surged with threats that made Jake's skin crawl. Just as they dove through the door, he felt a cold hand grab his ankle, yanking him back. "Get him!" A voice snarled, and panic flooded through Jake as he hit the ground, feeling the overwhelming weight of the shadows pressing in. As Victor and Dr. Wright scrambled to free him, he caught one last glimpse of their terrified faces, a moment stretched in time filled with desperation. Would they save him? Or would the shadows swallow him whole? The diner lights flickered once more before failing altogether, plunging everything into darkness. Nothing but echoes filled the void, leaving an ominous question ringing in Jake's ears. Could they escape this nightmare before it consumed them all? Jake's heart raced, thumping painfully against his ribcage as he struggled against the icy grip tearing at his ankle. The shadows writhed like snakes, whispering threats that sent chills up his spine. He stifled a yelp as the darkness seemed to fold in on him, swallowing the last remnants of safety. "Victor. Dr. Wright." He gasped, his voice barely cutting through the thick black air. He felt the weight of fear pressing down on him, squeezing the air from his lungs. Would they leave him? He couldn't allow that. With a surge of desperation, Jake kicked fiercely, feeling the grip loosen slightly. The moment he broke free, he scrambled to his feet just as Victor barreled through the kitchen door, eyes wide with terror. "Jake!" Victor shouted, his expression a frantic mix of relief and horror. Dr. Wright followed closely, looking back at the shadows that threatened to consume them. "We don't have time," he yelled. "Keep moving." The trio ran through the kitchen, the clatter of pans and the hiss of boiling oil punctuating the tension. The air was thick with the stench of grease and fear. Jake's thoughts whirled. He knew they were not merely escaping the diner. They were fleeing a fate that could rob them of their lives, or worse. As they burst into a cramped alleyway, the dim light flickered from a lone street lamp ahead. Shadows draped the ground like tendrils, and Jake glanced back to see the dark figures spilling out of the diner, malice burning in their eyes. "Which way?" Jake panted, his voice ragged as he led the way forward. "Left. We need to cut through and head to the car," Dr. Wright instructed, urgency lacing his tone. Victor, a few steps behind, stumbled over a discarded crate, his foot catching before he regained his balance, panic slipping into his features. Jake felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him, fury igniting against their pursuers. He couldn't keep looking back. They twisted around a corner, hearts pounding, senses heightened. Suddenly, Victor's scream cut through the night air, a raw, heartbreaking sound that froze Jake in place. "Victor!" He gasped, horror washing over him like ice water. When he turned, he saw Victor being shoved against the brick wall by one of their pursuers, the figure towering over him, shadowy and malevolent. "Stop!" Jake shouted, voice trembling. "Let him go." Dr. Wright swerved to face Jake, eyes darkening with urgency. "You have to trust me. We can't fight them now. We need to keep moving. Let him go." Jake shouted again, feeling the world tilt as desperation clawed at him. Victor's face twisted in fear, pleading eyes darting between Jake and his captor, who grinned like a wolf closing in on prey. "Jake!" Victor cried out, straining against the grip, his voice a searing reminder of everything at stake. "Run!" Dr. Wright roared, his eyes flicking over to the street where the shadows began to coalesce, a scornful laughter rising to punctuate their heavy threat. Jake hesitated, torn between instinct and logic. The voice in his head screamed to charge back, to save his friend, but fear clawed at his gut, urging him to flee. Without thinking, he made his choice. "Run!" he shouted, launching forward. With every ounce of strength within him, he propelled himself toward the shadow that gripped Victor, ready to fight. As he closed the distance, something unexpected happened. A blinding flash of pain jolted through his side. He stumbled, catching himself against the wall as a sharp crack rang out. Dr. Wright's hand gripped his shoulder, forceful and unyielding. "Now, Jake! We can't help him if we're caught." But as Jake looked into Victor's eyes, something inside him shattered. What if his choice cost them everything? What if this was it for Victor? The shadows melted closer, seeping into the alley like smoke. And in that moment, everything weighed heavy on Jake's conscience. Turning back would mean risking his own life. But abandoning his friend felt like betrayal. He stood frozen, caught between the dread of the past and the uncertainty of the future. Would he act? Or would the darkness claim them all? The shadows danced nearer, and each heartbeat echoed a single thought: time was running out. Jake's heart pounded loudly in his ears, drowning out the chaos around him. He couldn't stand there any longer. Victor's face haunted him, caught in terror as the shadow tightened its grip. "Go! Now!" Dr. Wright's voice cut through like a knife, a command wrapped in fear. Jake felt the urgency pull him as if a rope was yanking him back towards safety, but his eyes were glued to Victor. With each passing second, the shadows crept closer. A pit opened in Jake's stomach, a mix of dread and rage. He could not just leave Victor behind. Not like this. He took a step forward, desperation driving him. Suddenly, a violent shove sent him staggering back against the brick wall. A dark figure had emerged from the mouth of the alley, blocking the way. Its eyes glinted ominously, reflecting the dim light of the street lamp like polished stones. The figure chuckled, low and chilling, as if relishing the fear it emanated. "Thought you could escape, did you?" It moved with a sickly grace, creeping closer to Jake. "You have something I want." Dr. Wright pulled Jake back, gripping his arm tightly. "Forget the past. We need to get to the car. Now." His voice was filled with urgency, each word a lifeline in the sea of panic surrounding them. Maybe running was their only option. Jake felt the weight of Victor's fear pounding inside him, but he also understood the cold grip of inevitability. "Let him go," he shouted again, his voice breaking. "Do you really think I care about your friend?" The figure stepped closer, shadows wrapping around it like a dark cloak. "But your loyalty is touching, really. It makes this even more fun." A fresh wave of dread washed over Jake. Just then, behind the figure, he spotted more dark forms sliding into view. They were coming from both ends of the alley, blocking any chance of escape. "Jake, we have to go," Dr. Wright shouted desperately, tugging him back again. But Jake felt frozen. Outside the narrow corridor of his mind, he heard Victor's muffled cry, and with it, a flood of desperation surged within him. He knew they were outnumbered, but they were friends. They were supposed to stand by each other, no matter what. "Jake," Dr. Wright's voice dropped lower, more imploring. "You're stronger than this. You've got to choose now." The reality of their situation crashed over him like a tidal wave. Victor was still alive, still fighting. That meant there was still hope. He felt the fire ignite within his chest, blazing brighter than fear. "Run!" Jake shouted without thinking, surprising even himself. It wasn't an order, it was a cry of purpose. With a sudden burst of energy, he lunged forward, shoving past the looming figure. Jake felt a surge of adrenaline as he sprinted down the alleyway, heart racing like a drum, swallowing the space between him and Victor. Pain shot through his side again, sharp and unyielding, but he pushed through. The world narrowed around him, the shadows becoming a distant noise as determination gushed through his veins. But as he reached for Victor's arm, the tall figure turned, its face a mask of malevolence twisted with fury. "Fool!" it screamed. The sound echoed, dark and alive, cutting through the night. Jake felt its cold touch grasping at his ankle again, pulling him backward. But he wouldn't let it win. With every ounce of strength left, he yanked Victor free from the wall, hoisting him up as they both stumbled away from the grasp of darkness. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of a dark form stretching out, closer than he expected. He shoved Victor forward, shouting, "Go. Don't look back." Victor hesitated, then his feet were moving, scrambling toward the open street beyond the alley. Jake slammed his shoulder against the wall for leverage and started to follow. But as the shadows lunged at him, a chilling voice sliced through the air. "You can't escape this. It's only the beginning." Jake turned, fear rising in his throat, but he had no time to dwell. He barreled forward, chasing Victor through the darkness, the looming threat clawing at his back. The night held its breath, holding on to secrets, but the air crackled with uncertainty. Had they truly escaped? Or was this nightmare only getting started? As they burst onto the street, gasping for breath, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were still there, watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. Would they make it to safety, or was the worst still ahead? The haunting echo of that chilling voice lingered in Jake's mind, a dark promise that demanded answers. Jake's legs felt like rubber as they burst onto the street. The night air hit him like a cold slap. It did nothing to shake the heavy dread clinging to his thoughts. Victor stumbled beside him, both breathing in frantic gasps. The world outside felt surreal, the streetlights flickering, casting ominous shadows that made him feel uneasy. "Where's Dr. Wright?" Victor managed to choke out, panic threading through his voice. Jake's heart sank as he glanced back at the alley. I don't know. We have to keep moving," he urged, grabbing Victor's arm to draw him away from the encroaching darkness. The echoes of their footsteps bounced off the pavement, but as they hurried, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They had escaped the shadows, but had they truly left danger behind? "Jake, if Dr. Wright, I can't lose anyone else," Victor's voice quavered, the weight of helplessness pressing down on him. Jake squeezed his shoulder tighter, trying to force a promise of safety through his grip. They had to focus on the present, not the looming dread of their friend possibly being lost. A sudden crash echoed behind them, metal clashing hard and sharp. Jake turned, heart racing once again. The alley was dark and quiet now, but he felt the shadow still linger, lurking somewhere just out of sight. "Jake, please. We need to find Dr. Wright," Victor insisted. His hands trembled, and Jake could feel the supportive warmth of his grip starting to fade. "Okay, let us." Before he could finish, a cold gust rushed past them, instantly chilling Jake to the bone. The sound of laughter, low and predatory, filtered through the air, sending chills racing down his spine. All the air felt like it had been sucked from his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath. "Get down!" Jake yelled, shoving Victor out of the way just as dark shapes surged out from the alley, moving like a wave of night, creeping up the street toward them. Victor fell, hitting the ground hard. Jake barely caught his balance, watching in horror. The figures converged, a mass of shadows swarming with purpose. They were relentless, clawing the air with outstretched arms, and in their midst, Jake thought he could see the tall figure from before, words bubbling up from its twisted lips. "You shouldn't have run. We can play this game forever." It coiled its hand, an unnatural movement, as if beckoning both of them back into the depths of the alley. "Jake, up!" Victor shouted, scrambling to his feet with shaky legs. Jake felt a rush of panic as he grabbed Victor's arm, dragging him toward a nearby alley leading to a dark side street. They had to escape before the shadows could close in. They ducked into the alley, adrenaline pumping. The alley constricted around them, closing in like the jaws of a beast. Jake turned enough to glance back just for a second, and that could have cost them everything. The figures were closer than ever, their outlines sharp and ominous against the fading glow of the streetlights. Rounding a corner quickly, they nearly lost their footing, but Jake propelled Victor ahead, desperation fueling his frantic movements. Rights of the shadows churned behind them, hot on their heels. Without warning, Victor slipped, falling against the wall with a pained grunt. "Go!" he shouted, eyes wild with fear. "No, I want to leave you," Jake shouted back. Suddenly, a piercing scream erupted from the alley, echoing in the oppressive silence. Victor's eyes widened in horror. "That's Dr. Wright." They couldn't ignore it, they couldn't just run. Fear gripped them both, a vice tightening around their hearts. But could they afford to go back? "Jake, we have to save him," Victor implored, determination flaring despite the odds. A decision hung heavily in the air. Would they confront the growing shadows again, risking it all? Or would they keep running, hoping for safety where there was none? As Jake stared into Victor's pleading gaze, the foreboding shadows lurked closer, and he felt the weight of his fear, screaming for answers that may forever remain unspoken. What lay waiting in the darkness, and would they find strength to face it? The shadows loomed closer, squeezing the last drops of courage from Jake's heart. Fear felt like quicksand, pulling him into an abyss. The echoes of Dr. Wright's scream twisted in his gut, a reminder of the peril they faced. Victor's frantic eyes urged him to act. They couldn't let their chance at hope slip away. "Okay," Jake finally said, voice shaky but determined. "We go back for him." Before Victor could protest, Jake dashed toward the alley's mouth, the shadows swirling behind him like a storm desperate for its prey. "Stay close," he shouted, and Victor followed, fear igniting a spark of bravery as they plunged into the fray once more. They moved with reckless urgency, adrenaline sharpening their senses. Up ahead, they saw a flicker of movement. Dr. Wright struggled against the grip of the dark figure that had ensnared him, his face twisted with pain and desperation. "Don't let them take you," Jake yelled, his voice mingling with the horror surrounding them. The dark figure turned, revealing a face shrouded in shadow, distorted and sinister. "You should have stayed hidden," it hissed, strands of darkness sweeping toward them like a coiling snake. With a sudden surge of determination, Jake barreled forward, not thinking of the danger, only of the man who had fought on their behalf. "Let him go," he bellowed, feeling a new fire ignite inside him. As he stepped toward the shadow, it seemed to grow larger, bulging with a malevolent intent. "I'll shred you into pieces," the shadow figure snarled, but time stood still for Jake. This was no time for doubt. Victor was at his side, a newfound resolve glimmering in his eyes. Together, they clutched a discarded piece of metal from a nearby dumpster. The moment held electric, thrumming with urgency and possibility. "Now!" Jake shouted, and they lunged forward. The metal collided with the shadow figure with a sickening echo. It staggered, shrieking. "You fool! You think you can stave off the inevitable?" As Dr. Wright hit the ground, he gasped, "Finish it. You must destroy the power." In a heartbeat, the shadows began to flinch, as though the very air crackled with energy. Jake and Victor exchanged a glance, a silent understanding flaring between them. They had to harness their fear and counter it. "Together," Jake called, heart racing. "This ends now." They drew back the makeshift weapon and struck again, this time with the weight of their shared determination behind it. A blinding light erupted from the metal, pushing the shadows back, illuminating a pathway through them. Jake felt the weight of the darkness begin to shatter, pieces of it dissolving into the light like mist. The sound of their desperate breaths mingled with the growing silence as the shadows screamed and clawed at their retreat. "Run! Now!" Dr. Wright urged, scrambling to his feet. With renewed energy, they propelled themselves toward the light, the figures shrinking back, defeated. Outside the alley, they stumbled into the street, gasping, the fresh air filled with uncertainty but, for the moment, free of the dark. The shadows lingered at the edge of the alley, blackened forms melting away, their whispers fading into nothingness. "We did it!" Victor exclaimed in disbelief, allowing a rare smile to creep onto his face, a sense of triumph washing over them. "Not yet," Jake replied, chest heaving. "They won't give up easily." Dr. Wright's eyes pierced through the aftermath, still charged with seriousness. "This is only the beginning. We've started to unravel a sickness, but they won't stop until they have what they want." Jake's heart sank at the prospect of further conflict, but a flicker of determination still burned inside him. "Then we'll find a way to expose them," he vowed, feeling the entire weight of this new mission settle over him. "Together." "Together," Victor echoed, gripping Jake's shoulder, a tangible connection to their survival and friendship. As they stepped into the night, ready to face whatever came next, the first knuckles of dawn began to claw at the horizon. Light broke through, scattering shadows, a promise of a new beginning just on the edge of their reality. With victory lingering in the air, Jake heard a whisper deep in his heart. They weren't just fighters against darkness, they were beacons of light, and together, they would forge a path toward truth. This was their moment. Now, they needed to decide what would come next, and there was no turning back. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories we'll share. Smash the like button now to help feed the algorithm and keep our corner of the internet thriving. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. What do you think is next for Jake and Victor? And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything. Only true fans understand the power of standing with a story.